Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, July 7th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. There could be dramatic ramifications for the cabinet after Supreme Court judges today voiced disapproval of Prime Minister Netanyahu's holding of multiple ministries. The justices were reacting to a petition by Yesh Atid against Netanyahu holding the foreign, health, and communications ministries, saying that it was against the basic law. The judges made their message clear during a discussion on the petition, which focused on Yaakov Litzman serving as deputy minister with ministerial authority. The petition described the appointment as a deception and called for Litzman's removal. Judge Hanan Meltzer explained that according to the updated basic law, the prime minister cannot hold any other ministry. The court instructed Yesh Atid to present the judges with an amended petition next week calling for the removal of the prime minister from all other ministerial positions. The latest deadline for a nuclear deal between Iran and 6 world powers will not be met. Just a short time ago, EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini told reporters that the midnight deadline will pass without an agreement and that talks will go on for the coming days. Reports from Vienna indicate that serious divisions remain between the sides, but also intense efforts are underway to resolve those differences. Talks have been focused on Iranian stockpiles and the timing of lifting of economic sanctions.
We are continuing to negotiate for the next couple of days. This does not mean we are extending our deadline. I told you 1 week ago, more or less, we are interpreting in a flexible way our deadline, which means that we are taking the time, the days we still need to finalize the agreement, which is something that is still possible, even if now we're getting into the difficult time. I am here to stay, to continue, together with all the teams, all the 6 teams are here, together with the one of the European Union, to continue the work on the text and to continue negotiations. We have a space. It is difficult, but we all know that we have a very important responsibility we cannot miss.
Half a dozen Israeli Bedouin, 4 of them teachers, have been arrested for joining the Islamic State and spreading ISIS dogma in their classrooms. We get more from IBA's Ari O'Sullivan.
The Shin Bet Security Services has announced that it has arrested a cell of 6 Bedouin in the Negev town of Hura and Rahat for supporting the Islamic State and spreading the terrorist group's ideology. 4 of them are teachers. They not only met among themselves, but also among a wider circle to persuade other Israeli Arabs to join them. Police said they also used their influential position as teachers to spread ISIS, also known as Daesh, dogma to their students. Some reportedly showed ISIS films and distributed propaganda. The cell had been planning to travel to Saudi Arabia on a religious pilgrimage and then get tickets to Turkey, where they planned to slip into Syria and fight for the Islamic State. They took out passports at the Interior Ministry in Beersheba and then found themselves on the Shin Bet's radar. Education Minister Naftali Bennett vowed that terrorists would not be allowed to teach in Israeli schools. One of the suspects preached ISIS dogma in the village mosque, and another pushed Islamic State ideology in social media websites. This is not the first time that ISIS activists were uncovered in Hura. A year ago, a resident sneaked into Syria and was killed fighting for the Islamic State. Until now, 47 Israeli Arabs have gone to Syria to join ISIS. Some returned to Israel and were arrested and convicted. But some experts say the only way to stop the Islamic State is by killing them.
How do you cope with Daesh and other barbaric terrorists like them? And they're probably the most barbaric of them all. The simple answer is you kill them. There's just absolutely no room for compromise. You kill them until they begin to moderate. And usually people learn the hard way by incessant hurt. And that's what happened to many other terrorist organizations, and that'll probably happen to Daesh as well, but it'll take some time. But the only way to get to them is to hit them hard.
The Shin Bet say that the great majority of the Arab public in Israel oppose the Islamic State, but police insist that the potential for ISIS ideology to take hold among disenfranchised Negev Bedouin is enormous. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
Police have arrested 9 more suspects in connection with an attack last month by members of Israel's Druze community on a military ambulance transporting wounded Syrians to hospital. 1 Syrian man was beaten to death and another was wounded in the attack. Police said those arrested were from Druze villages in the Golan Heights and that the operation attempts to bring to justice all those who took part in the lynching. in addition to those arrested immediately after the incident. 2 IDF soldiers were also wounded in the attack while trying to protect the wounded Syrians after a mob of Druze residents blocked and stoned the military ambulance taking to hospital the Syrians, whom the Druze community suspected as fighting against their brethren in the civil war across the border. The leader of the Druze community in Israel, Sheikh Muwaffaq Tarif, strongly denounced the attack. A gag order has been imposed on all other details of the investigation. Middle East commentator Gil Troy says that the Druze community finds itself in a very complex situation.
You start with the fact that it's simply heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see the Druze community, which has been so loyal, has been so heroic, has been so important in creating an Israel that's integrated, that's multicultural, that's multidimensional, now being defined by a few hooligans. And we should be so careful not to do that, because we don't like it when it's done about our bad people. It's not done, it shouldn't be done for the Druze. But now, of course, everybody's talking about how the Druze attacked the ambulance. No, certain members of the Druze community who were inflamed by certain rumors, because it's a very complicated and scary situation, and they have brothers and sisters and cousins on the other side of the border who are suffering at the hands of ISIS, came and did something which was horrific. And the Israeli authorities are hunting the people down and will arrest them and put them in the Israeli justice system. And you have this tragedy of, the one hand, Israel reaching out to Syrians and taking care of them with humanitarian medical gestures. On the other hand, Israel being a multicultural, multidimensional country that brings in the Druze and empowers them. And what do? And this is the complexity of the Middle East.
The war on Islamic State was the topic of deliberation at the Pentagon, where U.S. President Barack Obama and the top military brass discussed strategy going forward. Talks reportedly focused on the effectiveness of U.S. airstrikes in disrupting ISIS ground advances in Iraq and Syria. This week, the U.S. began targeting Raqqa, the self-proclaimed capital of the caliphate, while Kurdish armed forces gained control of a swath of territory near the Turkish border. The combined effort seeks to cut the highway between Raqqa and Turkey in order to stop the flow of foreign fighters to Islamic State. Following his deliberations, Obama spoke about U.S. objectives.
This will not be quick. This is a long-term campaign. ISIL is opportunistic and it is nimble. In many places in Syria and Iraq, including urban areas, it's dug in among innocent civilian populations. It will take time to root them out. And doing so must be the job of local forces on the ground with training and air support from our coalition. In short, ISIL's recent losses in both Syria and Iraq prove that ISIL can and will be defeated. Indeed, we're intensifying our efforts against ISIL's base in Syria. Our airstrikes will continue to target the oil and gas facilities that fund so much of their operations. We're going after the ISIL leadership and infrastructure in Syria, the heart of ISIL that pumps funds and propaganda to people around the world. In order for us to succeed long-term in this fight against ISIL, we have to develop local security forces that can sustain progress. It is not enough for us to simply send in American troops to temporarily set back organizations like ISIL.
The nation is marking 1 year since Operation Protective Edge, during which 67 soldiers and 6 civilians were killed. A state ceremony was held yesterday at the Mount Herzl Military Cemetery in Jerusalem in the presence of President Reuven Rivlin and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Knesset is marking the war with a series of debates and hearings. We get more in this report from Dennis Zinn.
The memorial service on Mount Herzl for the IDF soldiers and civilians killed during last year's war in Gaza was held close to the section that was allocated to Operation Protective Edge. Many of the 67 soldiers who lost their lives are buried there. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu used the opportunity to warn Israel's enemies that they'll pay dearly for all belligerence against the citizens of this country. He said that the IDF is closely watching developments in the south and is poised to respond if necessary. Netanyahu was referring to recent events in Sinai, where ISIS has established bases, and in Gaza, where Hamas is trying to rearm. However, he also said that Hamas is still reeling from the results of its last aggression. President Reuven Rivlin said that Operation Protective Edge was a moral war intended only to protect the people of this country, while Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon said he feels a deep commitment to bring home the bodies of soldiers Hadar Golden and Oren Shaul that are being held by Hamas. The 50-day war in Gaza is the second longest war in the country's history, during which nearly 5,000 rockets and mortar shells were fired at Israel. Some 2,500 soldiers and civilians were wounded. The Knesset held a debate this morning to discuss the rights of 322 soldiers who have been declared permanently disabled to some degree, including 8 who are totally incapacitated. Some of the disabled complained to the committee that they are not receiving due compensation. Roy Katz, one of the soldiers severely wounded in the operation, is due to return home for the first time this week, if just for the weekend. His mother Nicole said, regardless of his disability, she's overjoyed that her son is finally coming home. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
There was drama last night at the Knesset as the coalition barely managed to approve the two-year budget outline and only did so at about 2 in the morning. As the vote approached, the fragile nature of the narrow coalition became apparent. After counting heads, the coalition whip realized that they needed to bring in a missing MK from home to ensure the passage of the motion. Minister Yuval Steinitz was ordered to come in from his home in Mevaseret as Minister of the Economy Aryeh Deri played for time at the podium until he arrived. The final vote was 56 to 54 in favor. The government now has until August 31st to submit the budget for approval by November 19th. The ball is in Greece's court. That's a message from German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande, who sent a harshly worded message to Athens demanding that Greece come up with serious proposals in order to restart financial aid talks, a day after Greeks voted overwhelmingly to reject more austerity. The Eurozone's most powerful leaders say Athens must move quickly if it wants to secure a cash-for-reform deal with creditors and avoid crashing out of the single currency. Pressure is building on Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras ahead of today's Eurozone summit in Brussels, as the European Central Bank keeps a tight grip on funding of Greek banks. For the moment, the ECB is keeping the banks afloat and saving Greece from a chaotic euro exit that would inflict more pain on its people and gravely damage the currency. How is the Jewish community in Greece coping with the financial crisis? According to a report today in JTA, the community of 5,000 is grappling with two main concerns: how to provide emergency assistance to Jews in need and how to ensure that community institutions can continue to function. Among those particularly hard hit are the poor and elderly members of the community, including many Holocaust survivors. For some 55 needy Jewish families, a cash welfare payment is the only thing that gets them through the month, and of lately they have been receiving a portion of their payments in the form of food coupons. In recent years, the community has been diminished by the economic woes, and many of the younger Greek Jews have left the country looking to work or study in other European countries. The recent surge in Palestinian terrorist attacks against Israelis has also seen an unprecedented assault against the oldest and most prominent Jewish cemetery in the world, the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Palestinian vandals have been systematically and with impunity smashing tombstones, setting fires, and desecrating graves, making it an increasingly dangerous place to visit. IBA's Eli Wogelanter has the story.
The Mount of Olives is the oldest Jewish cemetery in the world, with 150,000 to 200,000 graves that include ancient prophets, state leaders, and simple folk. Among those buried here are rabbinic giants such as Nachmanides from the 13th century and Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the land of Israel. But not only prominent rabbis are interred here. Eliezer ben Yehuda, the founder of modern Hebrew, Nobel Prize-winning author S.Y. Agnon, former Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and Henrietta Zold, who established Hadassah, are all buried at this 3,000-year-old cemetery. Now it is under attack. In the last 2 weeks of June, there were 90 desecrations of graves on the Mount of Olives, with many tombs pried open, defaced, smashed into pieces, or blackened by fire in attacks by Palestinians from nearby neighborhoods. The problem has been festering for years. And in addition to the tombstone vandalism, there have been reported incidents of stone throwing at cars and other attacks during funerals. Jerusalem City Councilman Aryeh King, who lives in the adjacent Ras Alamud Jewish neighborhood, has seen the destruction up close.
I lived there for 18 years. I can tell you that the last year was one of the worst years in Mount of Olives, especially at the last, I would say, 4 or 5 months. Specific at the last 2 weeks, there is kind of a reducing number of attacks against Jews, against tombstones in the Jewish cemetery in Mount of Olives. It's not because of the Ramadan, it's because there is more police that is present in Mount of Olives and in the surrounding of Mount of Olives because of the Ramadan, not because of protecting people coming to Mount of Olives. And it's proving that if there will be more security, more police there 24/7, less damage will be in the cemetery and less Jews will be attacked on the way to the cemetery.
Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld says security officials are working to apprehend suspects and that visitors should not be afraid.
First of all, you can come and visit the grave areas on a regular basis without any problems whatsoever. Our units are there in order to enforce and carry out security measures day to day, both during the day, during the evening. We're also using CCTV cameras in the area to secure the general area. This is part of ongoing security measures inside Jerusalem, inside the Old City and around the Old City, including the Ramadan period which we're in at the moment, where thousands of people are visiting in the Old City.
The Religious Services Ministry recently announced it was planning to double the security budget to safeguard the site. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
Google and Waze, the Israeli mapping company, are getting into the world of transportation. A new app was launched yesterday in Tel Aviv called Ride With, and it allows users to share rides with fellow commuters going in the same direction. Riders send a request for a lift to work, and drivers who are using Waze and are going their way can pick them up for a small fee. Ride With says it is in no competition with taxi services such as Uber, Lyft, and Get, although these companies have already expressed concern with the initiative. If successful, Google could introduce the service elsewhere in Israel and even around the world.
What's interesting about this bit is how Google planned by regulators in Israel and probably all around the world. And they're not sketching it as your usual carpooling service. They're saying this is just for commuters, and they're going to limit the amount of rides that any driver can offer. So it would only be like he's picking up his neighbors and going to work and then coming back and not actually making a profit out of it. So they can only pay for the expenses, which is gas and wear and tear. And that's basically it. I'm not sure how this actually fits with Israeli regulation, which is quite strict and quite literal. That would be very interesting to watch how this plays out.
Congratulations to the Israeli IDE water technology company, as it has been ranked number 18 on the MIT list of the 50 smartest companies. Each year, the MIT Technology Review compiles the list based on the companies that have displayed impressive innovations in the preceding year. IDE came in ahead of Facebook, IBM, and Microsoft. It is also the only water technology company to be recognized on the list. IDE is based in Kadima and just celebrated 50 years of providing high-quality water worldwide. They lead the water industry with some of the world's most advanced thermal and membrane desalination plants. The companies on the MIT list have no idea that they have been nominated, and there is no lobbying for a mention, making it quite an honor for the Israeli company. In local money matters, the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading, while shares were up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Here are the late afternoon numbers. Turning to the weather, and temperatures will remain the same tomorrow. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. And that's all for this newscast. Aaron Viner will be here tomorrow with more news from Israel and abroad. Until then, I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.